So we got to the end of 21, right? What it was?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
We're going to make a right turn here, and we're going to take a little detour and then come back. We're going to start off in Galatians 4:29. Okay, one thing before we go into this, we know that this is Babylon, and what does Babylon represent? In at least the number of things that it's obviously a physical nation, but what else does it represent?
You mean the wayward church?
Yeah,
Is that what you're speaking about?
yes. How else might we describe the wayward church? Like we've looked at them a couple different ways. They're referred to in Revelation as, anybody remember?
The harlot?
Okay, the harlot, that's one. Earth dwellers,
Oh,
Earth dwellers, yeah.
fleshly Christianity. Last night I was reading in Corinthians with a couple guys, and they're described there as being carnal, versus the the other. But so yeah, fleshly Christianity, earth dwellers. In Galatians 4:29, if somebody wants to read that.
I have it. 4:29. At that time, the son born according to the flesh persecuted the son born by the power of the Spirit. It is the same now.
What?
I don't know.
read 28. It explains it.
Now you, brothers and
Oh, sorry.
sisters,
Go ahead.
like Isaac, are children of promise. At that time, the son born according to the flesh persecuted the son born by the power of the Spirit. It is the same now.
So the son born by the flesh, according to the flesh, persecuted the son. So the devil persecuted Jesus?
Well, what it's referring to is, at least as far as Paul, who wrote this, is referring to the children of promise, which would be in verse 29, him that's born after the Spirit. So you have him that's born after the Spirit versus him that's born after the flesh. Okay, you see the two sides of the fight. The
And
fleshly,
like the Old Testament, like it was based on
right,
from Abraham.
right. The fleshly man here, in Paul's example, is persecuting him that walks after the Spirit. So the fleshly man persecutes the spiritual man. And Paul throws this little tidbit in, so also it is now. Okay. Now, one of the things we see in the example is Babylon represents which of those two?
The earthly.
Yeah, the fleshly man. And of course, in the example here, the three guys in the fiery furnace would represent which one?
The spiritual.
Right. Okay. Now let's turn to John 6:63.
Wow. You want to read?
Sure.
The Spirit gives life. The flesh counts for nothing. The words I have spoken to you, they are full of the Spirit and life.
So here, Jesus is not talking necessarily about the Holy Spirit, but he's talking about the understanding things spiritually. And the words that he speaks aren't to be taken naturally, because quite frankly, if you were to read this chapter, when Jesus says, drink my blood and eat my flesh, and took that naturally, that's offensive.
Yeah.
He was making a point that his words are to be understood spiritually. So Paul talks about that. And of course, one of the battles we're seeing over and over and over in the Bible is the fleshly man versus the spirit man. It's repeated I don't want to say ad nauseum, but it's over and over and over again. Here's an example. Okay. Since we have time, 1 Corinthians 2, 12 to 14. 1 Corinthians 2, 12 to 14. It's saying the same thing, just in slightly different words, but not much different.
2, did you say 2?
1 Corinthians 2, 12 through 14.
You want me to
ahead.
read it?
Sure.
What we have received is not the spirit of the world, but the Spirit who is from God, so that we may understand what God has freely given us. This is what we speak, not in words taught us by human wisdom, but in words taught by the Spirit, explaining spiritual realities with Spirit-taught words. The person without the Spirit does not accept the things that come from the Spirit of God, but considers them foolishness and cannot understand them because they are discerned only through the Spirit.
So here he's talking about the spiritual understanding or the spirit man. And I think, I don't know if you said the word, but I think the word is the natural man or the fleshly man or the carnal man. He goes on in the next chapter and talks about. Now, Babylon seeks to appeal to the fleshly side, the sensual side, as evidenced by music. One of the things evidenced by the music. That's one of the things that's mentioned here. So that being said, let's go to Jude.
What?
Jude.
So Jude?
Jude. Jude only has one chapter, and I think it's starting at 17 through 20.
So Jude's 1, 17 to 20.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
But dear, excuse me, dear friends, remember what the apostles of our Lord Jesus Christ foretold. They said to you, in the last times there will be scoffers who will follow their own ungodly desires. These are the people who divide you, who follow mere natural instincts and do not have the Spirit. But you, dear friends, by building yourselves up in your most holy faith and praying in the Holy Spirit, I'll just read the rest. Keep yourself in God's love as you wait for the mercy of our Lord Jesus Christ to bring you to eternal life.
Okay, so let's match this up. Okay, in verse 17, remember the words I've spoken before the apostles that said, in the last times. All right, now that little passage there, in the last times. Now, Nebuchadnezzar, in particular, the dream, what would that reference? What was that dream about? Remember,
Was it the last time?
Statue?
the latter days. Okay, the dream referred to the latter days. And this passage in Jude starts off by saying, in the last time. Now, there might be some translations that will change it to, call it in the last days or whatever. But let's follow the implication of what we're saying here. We have last days under Nebuchadnezzar, and we have last days as those that are, Paul or whoever wrote Jude, I guess Jude did, huh? Who's talking about what is going to happen in the last days. Okay, so check box in each side. He talks about there shall be mockers. Would you consider Nebuchadnezzar a mocker?
Sure.
Sure. Is he walking after his own ungodly lusts?
Undoubtedly.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Now, he's made separations, but is he sensual? And it doesn't mean sexual, sensual, it means fleshly, sensual kind
Yes.
of thing. Absolutely. And so we find that each one of those classifications is the same in this, at least in these 3 or 4 verses here. So let's just scroll up a little bit into verse 12 in Jude and find out who he's referring to.
These people are blemishes at your love feast, eating with you without the slightest qualm, shepherds who feed only themselves. They are clouds with rain, blown along by the wind, autumn trees without fruit and uprooted, twice dead.
Right, so he's talking about the people that worship with them. Jude is saying these are people that are sitting in our midst. These aren't those out over there worshiping another god, but they're within us. And he says they're shepherds. He calls them shepherds that feed, that without fear feed themselves. I mean, shepherds are, those people that are supposed to be feeding the
Guarding
flock.
the flock. What
And
does that imply? Woo!
Well, yeah, exactly. He's talking about the ministers, right? In some
It
form.
would
or
seem
fashion.
that way, right?
Right. Carried along by the wind, autumn trees without fruit. So they would be a tree, or I don't know if you remember that passage that Jesus cursed because he came along when he was hungry and they didn't have any fruit.
Yeah.
Yep.
So here it's, the inference here, he's talking without saying it, he's talking about Babylon.
Hmm.
All right, and he's talking about what we're reading about back in Daniel. So the point being is it possible that fleshly Babylon intensely persecutes the spirit man? I think he already does, but whether how that increases 7 times I don't really know. I don't know if it's a tribulation thing or whether it just means it gets worse as time goes by. But anyway, let's go all the way back now to Daniel and we'll pick up where we left off. So you see how these things are hidden all over the place that refer to the same thing, the big battle between the flesh and the spirit. Sometimes the flesh is their own thoughts that one has within themselves that kills the thoughts of the spiritual thoughts that God gives you. But a lot of times it suggests that in the end times, the spiritual man is killed by Babylon. Right. So we left off at 22 through 25.
Okay, so the king's command was so urgent and the furnaces so hot that the flames of the fire killed the soldiers who took up Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. And then these 3 men, firmly tied, fell into the blazing furnace. Then the king Nebuchadnezzar leaped to his feet in amazement and asked the advisors, "Weren't there 3 men that we tied up and threw into the fire?" And they replied, "Certainly, your majesty." And he said, "Look, I see 4 men walking around in the fire, unbound, unharmed, and the 4th one looks like the son of the gods."
Okay, in 22, the flames slew those that ascended, or ascended up. Now, the thought seems to be that they walked on a ramp heading upward towards the top of the furnace, but the spiritual thing is those people that ascend up, again, and if you look at it in the same way, they're ascending. The 3 of these guys are ascending upward, much like the 10-day period that we talked about in chapter 1, which I'm sure you guys remember, the 10-day period that was also in Revelation. Remember the 10-day period? That's basically a time of testing.
Yeah.
And if you pass it, you seem to be promoted. Certainly for these 3 guys, it's a 10-day period, but the guys that ascend with them aren't able to do it. So they're killed. But in another passage, which I think was Exodus 19, where it talked about Moses being able to ascend the mountain of God, but if anybody else came close to the mountain and tried to climb up, they would be killed. Remember that?
Yeah.
Same sort of idea, I think, there. But it seems the way upward in God's kingdom is how?
Burn.
Through the fire?
Seems to be, yeah. And I know it doesn't make sense, but it seems to be that's the way he does the paradoxical. Yeah, that in my kingdom, that's the way it works. But in our world, we'd say, no, heck no, I don't want to go through no dang fire.
Yeah.
So they're thrown in and they fall down or fell down bound in the midst of their furnace. And we talked about what they were bound by. Yes. What were they again?
Ropes.
I thought they were bound by ropes.
It said what they were bound by. Let's see.
Well, the mighty men bound them. It didn't say what they used.
Uh-uh. They were
But
bound in their own clothes, but they
They were-
didn't say what they were bound with.
right.
No.
So I wonder what it means to be bound with your own clothes, because I don't have any idea, because it's hard to pin down all the different outfits that they're forced to wear.
But he made a point of saying what they were wearing, so it's got to be important, right?
Yeah. It's difficult because some of the places, if you look up the words, they're not even sure, because some of the words have seemed to, they're not really known what they exactly they're referring to, whether they're coats, whether they're garments, whether they're like leggings or whatever. So I don't know what it would mean to be bound up in your own garments. I mean, typically in the Bible, a lot of times the word, our garments are what we put on ourselves.
Right.
And I think or wonder if the point is because these guys kept themselves pure and so forth, their garments and their outfits, maybe that it kept them to the point of being able to withstand how terrifying this must have been for them. And they were actually able to stand on their doctrine in faith, trusting, well, whether we live or die, we're not going to worship anything else. So that's the only thing you guys, anybody have any other ideas what it could be?
No.
I don't know. I always read that and thought it meant he was so angry that he didn't bother to, take their clothes off and put them in chains. He just chained them up or tied them up the way they were. That's what I read, but you're right. I don't know if that's true.
And one other thing, like, I never saw that before, that they were bound up with their own coats, leggings, caps, garments. I never saw that. I assumed,
Why is that so important?
I don't know.
So Dar, your version says with their garments, like ours implies just that they were wearing garments, but not that they were tied up with them. You're saying yours says they were tied up with their own garments?
In 21, it says these men were bound in their hosen, which I view that as like pantyhose or pants, their
Oh,
tunics,
in them, right.
and their mantles and other garments, and were cast. But it says they were bound in them, and whether that means they're just wearing them or they're bound as in they're somehow tied up with
Oh,
that. I don't really know. I mean,
yeah.
bound is fetter. You ever heard of fetters? Suggest chains you can't seem to get out of or something. Something that's not good, but
Yeah.
So the king is astonished. He notices 4, not 3, and it says they're now walking. So if they're walking, they had to do what?
They had to be unbound.
Yes. What else?
Yeah.
They had to pass the fire test. I don't
They had
know.
to land on their feet. I mean, it says they were thrown in.
It actually says they fell.
Oh, they fell in?
Yeah, so they fell, but now they're walking, so they had to do what?
Rise up.
stand, yeah. Which is again, a great metaphor. In the New Testament, Jesus talks all the time about standing,
Rise
in the
up.
midst, rising. It's a big metaphor. So fetters seem to be, actually I don't know if the clothes are burned off, but they're now able to stand without the bounds, I'm guessing.
Yeah.
And the fourth man in the fire, he says, is like the Son of God's.
That's what he said.
So that would suggest and here's a question: who would we think that would be? Jesus?
I would think it would be Jesus.
Or
I always thought it was an angel when I was young.
Well,
but
that's what they taught us, right? I thought they taught us it was an angel.
I think it could be an angel. It
I
might.
think so too.
It might not be.
No, I really did think it could be an angel. But he does say the Son of God. So
Because he looks like this, like a son of God. The
how
gods.
come he
Yeah.
doesn't just look like a god and not the son of a god?
Right.
no,
Maybe
that's a good
he's-
point,
Maybe he
Meg.
was short.
Why is he not
Maybe
the
he was
uncle?
young. Huh?
Why not the brother of a god or the uncle of a god? Why the son of gods? I don't know.
Yeah.
That's a really, really good point. I wondered
That
that
is a
too.
very great point, Meg.
Maybe it was like son. Oh no, but it's actually S-O-N, right?
Yeah. Yeah, the son of gods, he says. What verse was that? 25?
25.
Yeah, that's the last one.
Like a son of the gods. So that says. Oops, down a little further.
See what it says in King
That was
James.
also Nebuchadnezzar talking, and he's mad, and he believes in a bunch of gods.
A son or a grandson is what I have, the concordance says it is.
A grandson? That's even
That's
more
weird.
specific.
A son or a grandson, yeah.
Now, in King James, it says, and the fourth is like the Son of God.
Who
That's
says
what it
that?
said. In King James, he answered and said, Lo, I see 4 men loose, walking in the midst of the fire, and they have no hurt. And the form of the fourth is like the Son of God. That's what it
They
says.
have no hurt.
They have no hurt. They're no hurted.
No boo-boos.
No boo-boo.
No boo-boos.
Yeah, it is a little weird. It is a little weird. Where does that come from?
Yeah.
Right? And why do the others say gods, plural, and a lowercase g instead of an uppercase? Because this says uppercase.
Yeah, I was just looking at the Septuagint one here. It says the same thing, like the Son of God.
Oh,
Who distinguishes? Why, I think the other ones say the Son of Gods with a plural.
they do,
Yeah.
and it's lowercase. Yeah.
Yeah. So that would be, God would be El-Aw. It's a Chaldean word, El-Aw. Whatever that means. So anyway, so we continue on. Somebody want to read? Well, obviously no spiritual principle, no spiritual increase, seemingly without fire, 10-day period. God's way is to increase with pain. Does that make him like what do you call those people that seek out pain? What do you call those people?
Oh yeah.
Um,
Oh, what
Oh.
the?
masochist.
Masochist.
Yeah.
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 Actually, I have no idea what it's called.
Somebody want to do the lot to the end here
26.
through 30.
Okay. Nebuchadnezzar then approached the opening of the blazing furnace and shouted, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, servants of the Most High God, come out, come here. So Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego came out of the fire, and the satraps, prefects, governors, and royal advisors crowded around them. They saw that the fire had not harmed their bodies, nor was a hair of their heads singed. Their robes were not scorched. I guess they were dressed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there was no smell of fire on them. Then Nebuchadnezzar said, "Praise be to the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who has sent his angel and rescued his servants. They trusted in him and defied the king's command and were willing to give up their lives rather than serve or worship any god except their own God. Therefore, I decree that the people of any nation or language who say anything against the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego be cut into pieces and their houses be turned into piles of rubble, for no other God can save in this way." Then the king
Oh.
promoted Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in the province of Babylon.
It doesn't say this in our Bibles, but this is the only other difference in the Septuagint. It says Nebuchadnezzar heard them singing praises while they were in the furnace.
Oh, and I think I learned that in Sunday school.
Or in VeggieTales.
Is
I
it?
didn't watch Veggie Tales, Don. I
Oh,
was too
gee,
old
you don't know what you're missing. You should watch that one.
for Okay.
Well, we watched them over and over.
I love that one.
Yeah.
Nikki
So, yeah,
was
it
too
doesn't.
old for
Go ahead.
that. No, it's all right. Go ahead.
So we find that he tells them to come out. The people or the king's men witness it. And upon release, the fire had no power upon their bodies. The hair of their head wasn't singed. Their clothes or coats or whatever weren't changed, and they had no smell of fire on them.
That's crazy, man.
Yeah. And Nebuchadnezzar says, "Blessed be the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who has sent his angel and delivered his servants who trusted in him, set aside the king's command and yielded up their bodies rather than serve and worship any god except their own."
Love it.
So he decrees every people, nation, and languages which speak anything amiss against their God shall be cut in pieces and their house made a dunghill, because there's no other God able to deliver after this sort. Then they're promoted. Now, do you think there's any change in Nebuchadnezzar?
Nope.
Why?
Why?
Yeah.
He's fleshly.
He didn't change after the dream.
Right. Yeah, and you're right. I think he
Do you
is flesh.
think he changed?
What?
Oh,
Do I think he changed?
yeah.
Well, I just was looking at his words.
How
And-
similar?
Huh?
Like that they're similar?
I was just looking at like what he said. He said, well, he decrees that anybody that speaks amiss against their God shall be cut in pieces. Okay, whatever. And their house is made a dunghill, because there's no other God that is able to deliver after this sort. But he still seems to not get the idea that there's only one God. He
Right.
seems to continue on just sort of saying, yeah, well, gosh, your God is very strong. And he even, well, here's a question that I had. Is he saying in verse, let me scroll down here.
Edie, you're on mute.
Is he saying in verse 28, if you read it closely, is he saying that the God that they trusted in set aside the king's command? Or is he saying that Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego set aside the king's command? What is he saying there in 28?
Wait, say that again, Darren.
He defined.
Say that again. Ask that question again, Darren.
Is Nebuchadnezzar saying in verse 28, when he's talking about blessed be, their God, who sent his angel and delivered his servants who trusted in him, and set aside, mine says set aside the king's command and yields up their bodies rather than serve. Is he saying that God set aside, their God set aside the king's command, or they set aside the king's command?
They did.
They
I think I read that they set aside, they ignored or defied the king's command and
Right.
were willing to give up their lives rather than serve or worship any god other than their own.
You're probably right. I wondered if he still thinks he's the King of Kings, who's been
Yeah.
given keys to the kingdom, and that this God, whoever it is so powerful that he's able to set aside Nebuchadnezzar's words to save these guys. That's what I wondered if his point was. I know it was
Oh,
Huh?
maybe.
To me, his words seem self-promoting, as
right.
if
What
he's
they're
like,
saying,
hey,
yeah.
hey, everyone, I want you to look at me and listen to what I say. You know what I mean? He's not at all, in my opinion, acknowledging that God is above him. He's like, oh, okay, God, I got this. I will let everyone know what they need to do.
So that's what I got out of what he's saying. He's concerned about his image.
Yeah.
And yeah, your God's real strong, and he can set my word aside. And I'm the key. I have
Yeah.
the keys to the kingdom. Or maybe he's saying, you guys set my, because they did do that too, I agree. But he just doesn't get it. It's still all about him, even after he makes a decree. So I agree. I don't think that he's changed at all.
Yeah.
No, I don't think it's just really weird that he's foaming at the mouth so much that he put the fire 7 times higher, throws them in there, and then was like, look, there's 4 people there. Oh my gosh, let me promote you. Good job. Your God's strong. Yeah, I'll promote you. Nobody else can talk against this God. If he can
Yeah.
save over me, gosh, yeah.
Yeah.
Do you know?
Yeah.
He's nuts.
Yeah.
And then he promotes them. Ugh, it's crazy.
I think to be one of these leaders like this, you have to be such a narcissist.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
100%.
I was
Yep.
just thinking that. I'm like, how could you like do that to I don't know. I feel like there's
Well,
such a
I mean, to build an
evilness about it.
image of yourself that's 9 stories high,
Right.
90 feet high, like, of course you're a narcissist. Who does that?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Great.
Crazy.
So no great change in him. And again, he represents Babylon. It doesn't end here. Obviously, Daniel doesn't end here. So what does this mean in the overall picture? It's just, I'm not even sure. Any thoughts?
I forget
think
what the
it's-
rest of Daniel is.
I
Mhm.
think the message I take away is that no matter what, you have to stand with God. You can't stand with, you have to stand with the spiritual self and not the flesh or the earthly self. You have to. Otherwise, you'll be just like him.
You're gonna just burn up.
Yeah, like the guards.
Yeah. Because there's so much more.
Let me ask you guys a question. This probably has to do more maybe with next week, but does in so far we've seen in chapter 1 or chapter 2 and chapter 2, God speaks through somebody that doesn't have his spirit. He speaks to somebody that doesn't have his spirit, and he gives them prophetic information despite his misinterpreting it and not having any real understanding of what he sees. You think that still happens?
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think it still happens. Yep.
Any examples anybody think of?
Hmm.
I wouldn't say like prophetic, but I mean, I know that like people have said stuff to me that like say I don't know if maybe I was like questioning something or praying about something, And then like somebody will just say something to me that isn't necessarily like, somebody who's like reading and trying to have a relationship with God. And I'll be like, oh my gosh, like that was so God, that they just like confirm something that I was like praying about. Or, I mean, it's not really like, it's just for me,
Agreed.
Yeah.
And I've had that too. I've actually had one time where I was desperately seeking something and I turned SpongeBob on with my kids
Yeah.
were younger. And one of his lines in the show was my answer. And I said, "You're kidding." But yes,
Yeah.
because I've been desperately seeking and he answers with whatever means he desires.
Right.
That's it. That was a while ago. But
I would hope.
You don't still
So-
watch SpongeBob?
I would hope,
I
Dad.
love SpongeBob, just
I
like I
know,
love,
Jason always talks about
I
how you
love
love
him.
SpongeBob.
I love
I love
Joshua.
Patrick.
I love Patrick. Yeah, I love that show. I do.
Wait.
Just a quick story. When I was watching Donna's Kids, that was the show that Corinne would watch all the time. And Corinne would sit there like this.
I know.
And
we always
I would
said that.
watch it and laugh hysterically every time. And I'm like, how can you not be like laughing at this? It's hysterical.
Yeah, they would never
Yeah.
laugh, but they loved it and they said it was so
I
funny.
know.
They would
I
just sit
know.
there.
I know.
It's an adult humor,
It
Yeah.
is adorable.
not potty humor, but adult
Yeah.
humor.
Wait, go ahead.
I was just going to say we have like 3 minutes left. But I know there's passages in the Bible, Nebuchadnezzar being one of them, and other people that have prophetically spoken words and they're not holy. And they're actually referenced in the Bible as such and such prophesied that this would happen. And it was true. And I think in their ignorance, they, were speaking on behalf of God and they had no idea. So one of the things I thought which would be fun is if you guys, and again, if you can't, that's fine. But I was listening to a song this past week and I thought, oh my gosh, like those words are really like spiritual words. And I looked it up and I ran across this guy who was going into all these songs, and he's a Christian, maybe too far extreme, but he was a Christian who was throwing out all of these songs that have spiritual implication that the writers probably had no intention
Mm.
and had no idea they were writing a message that in essence could be considered words from God that were spiritually based. And I read it and I was like, oh my gosh, yeah, I think he's right. But I had read the lyrics or heard the lyrics and I thought, yeah, this is definitely one of those. But
What song was it?
Yeah, I was gonna.
it's an ELO song. It's a song. They do this in a lot of their songs, but one of their songs is called Waterfall. And it's one of those, it's probably not a song. It's a little before like Out of the Blue and the World Record and that kind of stuff. But yeah, this would be, if you guys can think of anything, we'll start off with that next time. And then
Like
maybe
examples?
yeah, anything that you guys can say, hey, I think this song, I'm not saying it's
Oh, music?
a Christian artist, but anything that you think like you thought, I bet this person, we have less than a minute, but I bet this person doesn't even realize they're speaking spiritual words, not necessarily an answer to prayer, but they're speaking these words that are a spiritual message without any significance. So if you think of any, we'll start with that next
Okay.
week.
Okay.
Okay.
Thanks, Dare.
All right, guys, have a good week.
Bye, you
Bye,
All right.
guys.
Bye, guys.
Bye.